So Jamal Adams has wanted to be traded from the New York Jets for quite a while now. I mean, I remember statements and rumors during the season were coming out, and these all seem to be pretty substantiated that Jamal Adams in New York probably aren't meant to be for a long time unless he gets a new long-term deal. And with those rumors, I've heard all types of teams, more prominently the Baltimore Ravens, involved with these trade talks, and all of these things make sense on different levels. But the one team I haven't heard in these talks that I really think should be involved, or should at least kick around the ideal of trading for Jamal Adams, is the Cleveland Browns. Why? Let me explain. Before we get into the rumors and why I think the Browns should or shouldn't go for Jamal Adams, let's talk about Jamal Adams, the player, because that kind of gets muddy, because all people talk about with Jamal Adams is that he's an elite safety, but they don't talk about specifically what he's really good at, what he's elite at, what makes him special. So I want to do that. And the first thing is, when you talk about Jamal Adams, I don't think you can describe him as a safety and give an accurate kind of picture of what his game is like. You have to describe Jamal Adams as a box safety. Now, that doesn't mean he's not valuable. That just means that's what Jamal Adams does, and does at the best level, is play kind of in the box. And when I'm talking about being in the box, because I mentioned this in my Grant Delpit video, for those who aren't aware, the box is just the front seven, the linebackers and the defensive line, kind of being in that area where, you know, a lot of tackles take place. And Jamal Adams excels in this area, unlike Grant Delpit, who really needs to stay away from the box. And yes, Jamal Adams can do other things. If he needed to play free safety, he could. If he needed to be a corner, he could. He can do all those things pretty well, but what he's special at, and it's almost kind of like Troy Polamalu, he's special at being a box safety. He's special at being that defensive signal caller, calling it out on the field, getting everybody lined up. He's very much like Troy Polamalu in that way, where he can see things happening before they happen, where he can call out different coverages and defenses. He has a great work ethic. His film study is obviously tremendous, and he is that, you know, the cliche, the quarterback on the defense, the guy who should wear the green dot. That's Jamal Adams 100%. That's what he brings to the table mentally. He is a strong leader who's going to be able to get your defense in the right position. And then when you talk about what he brings to the game physically, there's a lot. He's a very good athlete, but he's a great tackler. He has phenomenal technique. He wraps up. He can get tacklers from tight ends to running backs to wide receivers. You name it, he's tackled them. He's gotten them down. Quarterbacks, he's done it, and you can watch the tape and see him do it. And then if you watch his tape, it's almost like watching a linebacker's tape, where you don't really see a ton of him being in coverage or playing corner, or, you know, being matched up with the wide receiver. He's covering the tight end. He's coming down on screens. He's getting sacks. He's coming off the edge. He's getting physical with the offensive linemen. This is what he does well. He's very physical. He's very strong. He's very good at the physical aspects of being a safety in football. And honestly, he's almost a linebacker in my opinion. Like he can do all things that linebackers need to do nowadays, especially since linebackers are getting smaller and more athletic. He can do all those things very well, and then he can bring that physical punch along with it. He's really good at it. Like, if you compare Jamal Adams to a really good linebacker like a Joe Schobert, you really start to see this in the numbers. Joe Schobert had kind of a breakout year last year, a year that got him a long-term contract with Jacksonville. And in that season, Joe Schobert had 89 solo tackles. 7 of those were for loss. 4 were QB hits. Now, again, remember, Joe Schobert is a full-time middle linebacker, and also he had a good year last year. The Browns fans were begging the Browns to bring back Joe Schobert. I thought differently, but nonetheless, he's a good linebacker. Jamal Adams, from technically the strong safety position, had 61 tackles, but 10 of those were tackles for loss, more than Joe Schobert. 13 were QB hits, much more than Joe Schobert. And then if you look at sacks, Joe Schobert had 2 sacks. Jamal had 6.5 sacks. If you look at pressures, Jamal had 16 pressures. Joe Schobert had 5. Again, I'm not trying to trash Joe Schobert to tell you Joe Schobert's not a good player. Not at all. Joe Schobert is a good player, and that is why those numbers are very impressive for Jamal Adams, because he's better than a very good linebacker at certain elements of the game. I mean, he can create pressure on a pass game that is at a different level than any other strong safety in the NFL, and then he can finish those plays, which is the important part. You get a lot of corners who come down and try to do this stuff, but they can't finish. Jamal Adams finishes a lot. He sometimes forces fumbles. He's very good. And that's why the price tag for him, a first and a third, is almost extremely fair for a player like Jamal Adams. Now, that probably comes with the caveat of he needs to be paid once you sign him. And if that's a long-term deal, that kind of takes the Browns out. But that's why that price is that high. And it should be that high because he brings a lot to the table. He's not just a strong safety. He's so much more than a strong safety. He's almost two positions at once. And in today's game, where tight ends and more of the Lamar Jackson stuff is becoming more popularized, having athletic tackling dudes like Jamal Adams is very important to any NFL roster. Because again, this guy can cover bigger wide receivers. He can cover tight ends. He does those things. He's good off screens. He's good against running backs. He does all those things very well, and he also is very physical and can be in the box and not just handle his own, but stand out. So why should the Browns pay that price? Why should they pay a first and a third for a guy that, if they don't give a new contract to, will only be around for 2 years, right? This season and next season. Why is that worth it? And on the surface, that argument does make sense. It's not a long-term fix. You're not going to have him for more than 2 years because you're probably not going to sign Jamal Adams long-term. You're not going to have the cap space to do that. Keep Myles Garrett, keep Baker Mayfield, keep all the pieces that you want to keep, Denzel Ward, to make this offense pretty good. And also, the Browns just signed Carl Joseph to fill that strong safety position, and then they drafted Grant Delpit in the second round, very highly sought-after guy there. But again, Grant Delpit's not a box safety. You don't want Grant Delpit in the box. That's when Grant Delpit's at his worst. You want Grant Delpit as a free safety. And honestly, even with that considered, say you thought Grant Delpit could play in the box. Even with all those things considered, I would actually make the case that because you have those guys in the secondary, you have Andy Sedeo, you have Carl Joseph, you have Grant Delpit, you have all these guys. Because you have these guys, it makes trading for Jamal Adams make a ton more sense, to be honest to me. Because yes, if we're playing Madden and we're not adjusting players to scheme here, it doesn't make sense because then you have to bench theoretically Carl Joseph. What I'm saying is that with Grant Delpit and Jamal Adams, you have a ton of flexibility. You can have it be that you can have Grant Delpit at free safety. You can even have Carl Joseph still at strong safety. And then you can play around with Jamal Adams and put him in the box full time. Now, this would be more of that 4-2-5 that the Browns ran last year, but it'd be a more successful version of that because last year you didn't have the safety flexibility to make this happen. You didn't have the flexibility with the defensive backs. A ton of guys were injured. And sure, you could cover well, but you didn't have that physicality there to kind of take you over the top. Jamal Adams makes that possible. I mean, you could possibly run a Tampa 2 with Jamal Adams as the Tampa 2 linebacker dropping back in deep coverage if you wanted to. Because that's what Jamal Adams gives you. He can be a hybrid linebacker and play in the box for you and not just hold his own, but make plays. I mean, that's where he makes his money, is in the box. And then also, he's an elite man coverage option as well. And this solves the dreaded how do you stop the tight end problem? Well, you just throw Jamal Adams on them and let him handle that thing, because not only can he go in the box if the tight end stays home, but he can also get out in the field if the tight end decides to go out for a route. Same thing with running backs, and what makes him special is that his instincts are always right. He seems to know when running backs or tight ends are more willing to stay home or when they're going to get out of there. He really does have good instincts on that, which makes makes him kind of an elite box player. You add the flexibility that Grant Delpit could bring. You could put Grant at slot corner too to kind of add more size to the secondary to go along with Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward. Then you have Sadejo and Carl Joseph at the back of that defense with some kind of amalgamation of Mack Wilson and Jamal Adams in there. You know, if you add another defensive lineman to this team, then that's an extremely flexible and extremely good defense. This is how the Browns take that next step to stop the run. This is how the Browns take that next step to stop tight ends, which have been a thorn in the side in this franchise since they came back in 1999. This is what the Browns need on defense. He's a great tackler. The Browns don't have a ton of those. He's a great leader and the quarterback of the defense. The Browns don't have one of those right now. And he's physical enough to create a real presence in the pass rush that outside of Myles Garrett, that doesn't really exist on this team. He can cover tight ends, running backs. He can stop screens and running backs out the backfield, which is going to be extremely important against teams like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati that have a ton of those kind of plays in their playbook. He can also help you in the run game, and he can help you very much against a team like the Baltimore Ravens that are going to run to the edges a lot, going to use Lamar Jackson in an interesting way, and then make you have to adjust to that. And then when you adjust to that, what do? They throw to the tight end 20 yards down the field, wide open. Why? Because most teams don't have the flexibility to handle what the stress that Lamar Jackson puts on the defense. But if you have Jamal Adams, now that becomes different. Now that tight end isn't going to be wide open. Now Lamar Jackson isn't going to have all that space on the outside to run with. Now, in the same way that the Chargers in 2018 held their own and slowed down what Baltimore was doing because of their personnel, you have that flexibility if you're the Cleveland Browns. And since you play Baltimore 2 times a year, I think that's very important. When you look at this roster, you can say that the offense has all the big and little pieces, right? They got the offensive line down together, which they didn't have last year, and they have the flashy pieces now. They have those things. When you look at this defense, they have Myles Garrett, they got Greedy Williams, they got Denzel Ward, they got Grant Delpit maybe, and then they don't really have the small parts in between. Again, a lot of flash, but not a lot in between those flashes to hold them together. Jamal Adams, he will also be some flash, but he can handle it in the box, which is what you need right now. You need in that front seven some more game. Right now in the front seven, you have 1.5 playmakers, right? Mack Wilson looks like he can become a playmaker, but he hasn't proven it yet consistently. And then you have Myles Garrett. You need more playmakers in the front seven to hold your own against some of these offenses that are going to come at you in the AFC North. And I'm speaking mainly of, we don't know what Ben's going to be like with Pittsburgh, but Cincinnati's going to be a better offense. And Baltimore is one of the best offenses in the NFL. So you're going to need more playmakers. I would like 3.5 or 4 playmakers at the front seven. So I think the Browns do need to add 2 more. And I think those 2 are clear. In my opinion, adding Jamal Adams and then probably a Jadeveon Clowney would make this defense one of the best, most flexible defenses in the entire NFL. And sure, you would have to add both those players on the understanding that you're going to lose them in 2 years and there's going to be a ton of commitment for just 2 years. But for 2 years, you would have what should be one of the best offenses in football paired with one of the best defenses, giving you a very good chance at your Super Bowl window. And then you have to understand that the Browns are in the AFC North. This is a division that has Ben Roethlisberger in it, who led the league in passing, had a great offense when he was healthy. Sure, he's coming back off of an injury. We can see what happens there, but let's just assume he's still Big Ben. And then you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a ton of pieces around the quarterback, who's supposed to be one of the best coming out in a while in Joe Burrow. And then if you look at Baltimore, they were 14-2 last year. They have the reigning MVP, and they added pieces to that offense. So there's no reason to think that they should really have a significant slowdown, which means if you're the Browns, you need to be this good at defense to hold your own against some of these teams in the AFC North, which is why I think it is necessary to make drastic moves like this, which involve a lot of resources for a short period of time. So yeah, I think if the Browns want to really be able to win the division, want to really be able to get in there and really have a serious shot at getting at the Super Bowl this and next year, making a trade for Jamal Adams and signing Jadeveon Clowney on a 2-year deal is absolutely what they need to do. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think these are the moves that the Browns need to make, or do you think they can go about it some other way? Are you worried about this defense? Let me know down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.